which is $29 million to get everything done. We met with the county commission. They liked their proposal. And at that point, we were gonna see if we need to do any tweaks, but, you know, basically talked about the football field. If we reduced that capacity a little bit, it was only gonna save $250,000. At that point, that was less than 1% of the total project, so we just left everything like it was. Connie sent an email off to Mr. I messed his name up, McAnulty, which is with a bond company. And basically, what you have here is the response that he sent back to Connie. And when he sent it back to Connie, basically said that based on our school's fund capacity, that, well, first of all, the current two bonds that we have right now, we have one that'll mature April of 2020, so April of next year. The next one will mature in June of 2025. So we've got about 5-6 years on one more left on the other. Those cannot be paid off early. So we can't pay those off early. We cannot refinance into a new bond and go into with these because they've been refinanced before. So then it said, based on our school funding capacity, that once those loans mature, then we can redo another bid up to $12 to $13 million, which at that point I was a little skeptical because I thought back in 2001 they did like a $20 million project, and I talked to Dr. Winningham a couple times and we were like, hey, you know, what's going on here? So I emailed Mr. McAnulty myself and asked him some questions. So you can see here the questions that I asked. You know, one, currently we have two bonds. You know, just to verify that we can't pay those off early. His reply was the 2014 school refunding bond, so that's when they refinance those bonds, I'm assuming, to get the savings on those, and the other one in 2020, and it tells you the interest rates there on those. So they are not callable in advance of the final maturity. So basically he's confirming we can't pay those off early. So we're kind of stuck with those till 2020 or 2025. Second, you mentioned after these bonds mature in 2025, the school could borrow up to $12 to $13 million. In 2002, the board did a project around $20 million is what I thought at that time. How does the capacity drop from then? So our concern was, hey, we did $20 million back in 2001. How can we only borrow 12 to 13 when these mature and we owe nothing on that? So his response was, according to the county's audit, the only school bonds that was issued in 2002 was for $5 million that would mature in 2025. Then in '99, there was another one for $9.5 million that would mature in 2020. So between '99 and 2002, during that time frame, it was about $14.5 million that was borrowed. So it wasn't the 20. So his response was, you know, he's not trying to strap the school system and say you can only do this much and, you know, you're solely struck to this amount of money, but he's basing it off of the total debt service, which is anywhere from $700,000 to $900,000 based on what comes in through the wheel tax and what the county allots the payments to be toward the debt service. Now, he did make a remark and said that if there's any other funding in our GPSF funds, which I'm assuming are general purpose school budget, that we wanted to apply toward that, then obviously we could increase that loan amount if we wanted to increase it. So for instance, we say, hey, you know, $700,000 to $900,000 is what the debt service is going to pay every year for 25 years. We're going to put in $300,000 ourselves. Then he can recalculate and give us a new amount based on that. But obviously that's down the road until we get to that point. So then another concern that I had was, you know, the county, they're rebuilding another building, which is the new county building up there, and some of their debt. So my concern was, hey, is the total county's debt kind of strapping us? Because you look as a whole, and you only have a capacity as a county, you know, are we limited to 12 or 13 just because the county is under so much? And his response to that was the county has debt service obligations other than school debt on what it's currently making debt service payments. So I'm assuming that's totally separate on those points, but you know, I didn't get a clear answer on that one. So, but at this point, we're kind of stuck with what we have until we get closer to the 2025 mark. So my personal opinion, and this committee can agree or we can talk about it, is, and I talked to Dr. Winningham, I think after the last meeting, and kind of said, maybe there's like 5 big things we wanna focus on. We know the football stadium is gonna be an issue, it's gonna be a liability, so we've got to do something. I don't think we can sit here and say, yeah, we're gonna pull $4 million out of fund balance and pay for it. So the question is on that, do we get John back up here and say, you know, hey, we can't do everything we wanted to do, but obviously we need new bleachers, you know, we need to do different things, let's cut this thing down and get what we need within our capacity and try to do that. Is that something we wanna do as far as the football portion of it?
You're gonna have to do something.
Yeah, so, I mean, we've talked enough about it being a liability, and if we don't act quickly, it's gonna be a liability. So, I mean, is everybody good with that?
Yeah, I agree with that.
So we'll get a hold of John and have him to come back, and kind of look at, you know, what we can do to make it look nice and still come reasonable amount of money. Then you look at the Reach roof. So that's another one that needs the, you know, immediate action right now. I think he's got bids.
We've got a guy coming tomorrow that's gonna kinda help give us an idea on how we need to spec that out.
Okay.
So we can spec the bids out, go ahead and put the bids out.
Are
And
you-
on that, on the bus garage and the maintenance, all 3 of those.
How much are we talking about repairing the Reach? So the roof is not gonna fix it, I mean, it's gonna have to have more than that.
It's gonna have to have the windows redone too. At least those 2 things have to be done. Cause there are windows over there you can't shut, or you can't keep them shut, you know, I mean, you could nail them, but then it's usually your fire marshal, you know, why that window shut, your nail shut, you know, so. It's, but you can't keep them shut either way.
So,
There's several ways you do that. Are you gonna have it bid out, about fixing the windows half up, board half of them up?
We'll do it however you guys want to do it.
I think we can
We-
get by
that's-
with a few less windows.
We had
I think we
talked
could bring
about
some of
that.
them up, don't you?
Yeah.
We had talked about that at one time, is taking and blocking some of those up, you know, and, just making it a regular size window instead of those oversized windows. And that's gonna save you a whole lot of money when you order your windows anyway.
If you buy them cheaper, you fix those.
Yes, there's no doubt.
I think we figure out how many we can get by with, then block the rest of them up, then the ones we can get by with, you know, reduce those down to a standard window size and put the new ones in.
Yeah. So not anything you're having special order. Special order, it's gonna cost you a lot more money.
Yeah. Then he mentioned the other 2, the bus garage and maintenance roofs. They're gonna talk about those 2 when they're here. And, there was one more, I think, what was the other thing? That might have been it, but that was the big items.
We're gonna have to have some rooms at Rickman, though. I mean, we're right now out and the way it's growing, we're gonna have to do something there. Gonna have to build some rooms.
It wouldn't have been the bleachers
I
We
think it
did
might have
talk
been the
about
bleachers.
basketball bleachers. That
I
the
think
other
it
thing
was
we
the
talked about.
bleachers. That way, because we talked about those, bidding those out, and you're gonna bid those. Okay. So obviously, you know, those are the big things right at this moment, but I know there's other things down the road. And I talked to Mark and, you know, hey, it's gonna be a while before, you know, this will come into fruition as far as a big program. But I think as a committee, we keep this as a checklist. If there's anything we can pull out of fund balance or anything we can do throughout the year, that, you know, we can use this to kind of check off. And if, obviously between now and 2024, when we start getting prepared before the 2025 runs out, there's gonna be other items that, you know, come on through the schools that we can just add those to those. But, you know, and I really think obviously it's tight with money and everything, but, you know, we really gotta start trying to figure out, there's units that's gonna be going out too. I know there's
Right.
old units that are back from 2001, there's like 180 of them
Something like
that
yeah.
are 2001 age that are 18 years old or older. Obviously, at the end of the day, everybody's hopes in this room was we could get this and get everything done and be okay for the next so many years, but that's not gonna happen because of some other things, but.
The other thing I think we talked about was carpet in some of the buildings. Is getting rid of the carpet in some of the buildings.
For all of us.
Cause there's still, I know there's carpet at Hillham, I don't think there's any at Rickman.
That's not.
of course, we got.
I can go through this and figure out.
There's some just little foyer things, and recommend you when you walk in there, I think.
Okay.
I think it is.
I'll go through this.
We need to get rid of all the carpet in this, in our building.
Well, I'll go through this, because if there's any carpet, it should be listed
Yeah,
here.
I believe that's right.
So we'll use these as a gauge that we need to focus on right now, to go on.
I know one thing you talked about carpeting these floors. You might want to do the bid on that just to see, because these floors are pretty bad shape.
They're bad out here.
Pitiful.
It is, but when you go to Hillham, you go in that library and you go in the computer lab, it's really worse than this is.
Really?
Yeah, it's bad.
Uh-huh.
It's been in there a long time, and of course you've got, you've had a lot of traffic in and out with kids,
Spilling
stuff like that,
stuff.
spilling stuff. And of course,
Throwing it
there's
up.
stuff been spilled here, you can see.
I know.
But it's, but we need to get rid of the carpet everywhere.
So, hey, the building committee's not going away, we're still here, and we'll, still meet regularly and talk about things, and I think these things that we talked about is kind of the priority items right at this moment. Then once we get the bids back, we'll just sit down and agree to kind of how we're gonna fund that to get these things taken care of, which is the major things right at this moment. Then at that point, we'll just kind of go on. If anything's brought up throughout the year, we'll just refer it to our committee and sit down and add it and talk about it, or whatever we need to do and figure it out.
What concerns me is that when football season is over with this next year, the very next day, we need to be in there.
If we're gonna have the stadium ready for the
Yeah.
following
year.
season,
We don't need
we've
to
got
drag
to
our
do
feet.
that. If
Yeah,
we
the
don't,
following
we'll
year.
just have to put it off another year.
Can you ask John tomorrow when he can come back, the quickest he can come and we can meet
I can
again?
text him right now.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. So
That was two questions I was gonna ask.
I mean, that's when you need to start out, your last game's over, you need to have
The
a plan of
minute-
action right
the
there.
minute it ends,
The demolition
you
crew
need to
already tear it
start.
down.
I mean, even if it's to the point, I think Mark and I talked about it, if, the bleachers, if we keep the capacity the way we want it, we could even go goal line to goal line and come in and keep that back area open, so we wouldn't have to redo a whole new parking lot down there and still have the handicap parking over there. And, obviously from a cosmetic aspect of it, you'd wanna do the bleachers and probably a fence around it, make it all look really nice and everything.
But you can do away with that concession stand over there, that's $1 million.
Let me tell you what somebody told me.
Yeah, now the only thing about going through the architect, well, two things. One, if we try to bid it ourselves, then you're gonna run into, this one's gonna do that one's gonna do this one's gonna do that, it's probably gonna cost you more in the long run. Two, going through the architect, probably getting it done the right way, ensuring that everything's met, through any architect, they're gonna have to follow the compliance as far as the restroom capability is for the people. So we're still gonna run into an issue that they're gonna say you need X amount of restroom space based on the capacity, because they're not gonna tell you no, because that's the way they have to do it.
They have to do
We can sit and try to hire somebody to do just the bleachers and a fence and keep the bathrooms like they are, but yet we may run into more money in the long run because we're going through all these different people to do it and may not get it done right.
Are the bonds people telling us that we can't borrow that much money, or did I miss something there?
The bonds people are telling us, based on our
Dead.
countywide debt and our capacity to pay it back,
Right.
that we couldn't borrow that much money.
We could borrow it, but our payment would be.
Almost unrealistic.
To the point that in the existing budget, we couldn't make the payment.
And right now, the 12 to 13 million, he's only using that, which is the $700,000 to $900,000 is based on what the
What we're
education
paying-
debt
what we're
service.
paying right now
That,
today.
well, that's what comes in
That's
from
what you're
the
paying now, 700,000 a month.
7 to 9.
A year?
Yeah, a year, which is a little under $1 million. Now, if we come back and say, hey, we wanna put $200,000 additional per year to that, which we would have to fund ourselves somehow, then obviously you could borrow more at that point, so. All right, so that's the big items, so we'll start working on those, and, the next meeting's Tuesday night. If John can get here before then I'll see if everybody can meet. If not, as soon as John can get here, we'll kind of get that lined out and get going, because between that, the bids coming up, the bleacher bids, and I'll go through the carpet and get Mark a list, on those for all the schools that's got carpet based on this, and we'll look at all that.
I know what they did
I
that
know.
floor,
Yeah, it ain't next week.
they did that floor down.
We ain't got no meeting next week, week of the fourth.
It's the
Not
ninth,
now.
sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, just making sure.
Sorry.
I know that.
The four deals that you're gonna really focus on are the roof at the Reach Building, the football stadium,
Yeah,
the
Bus
garage,
cut.
bus garage,
yeah.
and bids on the basketball court.
Well, the maintenance roof,
Maintenance on.
yeah, then the basketball court, what we talked about last meeting was the floor that's buckling up, the
Right.
insurance is gonna cover it.
Good.
But while they're doing it, we're gonna get bids on bleachers to see if we can just replace those bleachers at the same time.
We think they'll have to take the bleachers out in order to repair the floor. If they do, I mean, it ain't gonna hurt you to get bids.
Have they found out why they done it, what caused it?
I don't, no.
Well,
not
that's the
this
roof
point.
leak
I
for
don't-
the longest time.
I'm
I
gonna
don't
say
know.
ground surface water seep back.
Susanna
down.
had
That's
her-
what they think, but I don't know that they'll ever know till they take all that stuff up.
Susanna had her
Once
senior
they
Well,
finish
pictures.
blood
Some
come
type
back
of
in the
pond
spring,
down there.
that pond down there, that water has come back in on the building.
It's at recess.
Susanna had her senior pictures yesterday, and they had it in the gym, and I went over and looked at it. And right in front of the scorers table, I guarantee it's that much
Yeah.
bowed.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
noticed that one night I was walking back from taking
And
pictures, I got.
now-
Whoa, y'all better get this.
Now on the court next to the volleyball holes, they're buckled up beside those, I
Yeah,
think on both
it's,
sides.
It's raised up out there, I'm gonna say that much.
Oh, yeah.
Because Richard go out there and bounce something down on it, and that's about how much it gives.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Wow.
It's really unreal.
We just redid that thing about 2 years ago.
That was the section that they redid 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
They cut a big section out, about a third of the floor, they cut it out. Took it all the way down, brought those big fans in there, and they blew and blew and blew for months. And they thought they had it repaired, and so they went back and put all that stuff back in, and then but that's where it's supposed to be.
Them new lights might be so bright, it's just trying to rise. up.
John,
to-
John,
I
like
guess
the
that's what
sun,
it is.
drawing it out.
You know, you couldn't tell, that actually started buckling
Before
before
the
they
lights.
did the
Yeah.
lights, and you couldn't tell it. But once they put those new lights in there, you could stand over to the side and it was obvious.
I was standing there watching their pictures, and I'm like, I wonder where that big thing they're talking about is, and I turned my head, as soon as I turned, I'm like, right there it is. You
Yeah,
can't miss it.
You can't miss it.
No. I stumbled over it myself.
It would be dangerous to play a game on that
Yeah.
floor.
Yeah,
right
we're
now.
Well, they have it